your assessment of what you were walking into was what? What did you think the 2 or 3 biggest things you had to do immediately?
The 2 or 3 biggest things we had to do immediately. First, we had to stop fearing the future and decide that while our history and our past were wonderful things, they weren't enough. In other words, we had to redefine what is Hewlett-Packard for the 21st century. It was 1999. What are we going to be? Are we going to be a leader, or are we going to be a laggard? That's a big deal. It's not simply a philosophical, squishy question, because once you decide we're going to lead, there are consequences.
Sure.
So that was one thing. A second thing we had to do was return to our roots of innovation and inventiveness. This was a technology company, but we were no longer among the top 25 innovators in the world. By the time I left, we were generating 11 patents a day for 2 years running, and we became the 3rd most prolific innovator in the world. And the third thing we had to do, related to the first 2, was we had to execute a heck of a lot better. We had to start making quarters and making numbers and serving customers better. We had to have more operational discipline.
Right.
Each one of those things are hugely difficult.
And can be painful. And speaking of tough choices, did you not preside over the departure of something like 7,000? There was some massive number of people left the company.
I presided over the departure of over 20,000 people.
By the end, it was over 20,000.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Which is the most painful thing of all.
Right. But but that was also, to the conversation we were just having, it's a recognition that maybe the people in the jobs right now are not doing the work that needs to be done.
Well, or sometimes that's clearly the case for individuals. But when you're talking about massive layoffs, which we did on my watch, you're talking about a recognition that perhaps the work that's getting done no longer needs to be done at all.
Right.
Or perhaps the work needs to be done somewhere else.
Change is hard, though, in a general sense, right? Because people who've been doing things for a long time one way are often very reluctant to stop doing them.
Look, we're all human beings, and it is human nature, and it is universal, that change is always resisted. Right. Change is always resisted because people are afraid of it. Right. Change is always resisted because they're afraid to lose something or afraid to fail, and that's why to drive change successfully, which all progress requires, there has to be a vision of the future that's more compelling than the fear that change engenders. That's why leadership is required. It's why management isn't enough if you're trying to change.
Right. And the board was supportive in these early years before the merger of the sorts of changes that you were talking about. They understood what you understood.
Oh, the board was incredibly supportive, and in fact, the board and I, and of course I was chair and member of the board, we were unanimous in every decision until the decision to fire me, which was not unanimous, which was terribly contentious, and which really tore the boardroom apart after I left, as events have proven.
Well, let's stay. I want to come to that, but let's stay back in the time before that happened, and let's talk about the merger. This was really your impetus. You said we need to merge HP and Compaq.
Well, that's not completely true.
That's always that's often the story that's put out there.
That's the story that's put out there. The real story is that I had been looking at Compaq for some time. But the initial idea to acquire Compaq came from Compaq and came from a couple board members. This was now in 2000, and the tech boom was over and the tech bust was happening. And it was a painful time. And so I said, we have to examine all of alternatives. We examined our strategic alternatives in great detail for 9 months. And we examined what it would take to really successfully integrate Compaq. Because talking about a deal is one thing, paying for a deal is one thing. Doing a deal is a totally other thing. And frankly, I didn't make up my mind until that 8+ month deliberation process was over, when I became convinced the strategic logic is sound, we can in fact integrate these assets successfully. And it is the best move for this company to achieve our objective of leadership, which, as I said, was our first order of business. Are we going to lead or not? It was clear, based on our assets, both those we owned and those we acquired, and the position of our competitors, that we could in fact beat Dell, that we could in fact surpass IBM as the largest technology company in the world, both of which have been accomplished.